Botswana, Namibia, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, and Lesotho. They are not just our neighbors. They are our families. We cannot afford to have our neighbors to starve to death. You can't have people willy-nilly deciding to attack others with no basis of the attack. There's a grouping that wants to mobilize people around a particular tribe. So if you cannot speak that language, then you are deemed a foreign national and you are undocumented. And we must also be clear, refugees, not the ones who go home during Christmas holidays. What's worse is those that are involved in criminality, those who intimidate South Africans not to run spaza shops and go to an extent of abducting them, kidnapping them, burning their shops, threatening them, beating them up. Those who are involved in selling drugs to our children, in drug peddling in our communities. Those who want to claim they're kings in our own country. And you say South Africans must sit quiet. South Africans will not sit quiet. On safety and security, the immigration challenges facing South Africa. Cabinet condemned the viral circulation of fake videos and images claiming to be attacks of foreign nationals in South Africa. The fake videos and images are not only fake, but they are intended to undermine the good reputation of South Africa internationally and undermine South Africa's pursuit of a better Africa agenda. South Africans are within their right to protest against the spiraling illegal immigration challenge, but violence linked to those protests in the past is not acceptable, and law enforcement must deal with the instigators of such violence decisively. Cabinet condemned the opportunistic attempts to hijack the genuine concerns of South Africans about high unemployment and limited economic opportunities by mobilizing South Africans to destabilize the country, including mobilizing attacks on foreign nationals and the tribal mobilization trend. Cabinet reiterated that there is ongoing work to address the problem of illegal immigration, which work includes the strengthening of border management through the work of the BMA, speeding up deportations, dealing with criminality within the immigrant communities, and protecting jobs and opportunities for South Africans. On opportunities for South Africans, Cabinet has directed the Department of Employment and Labour to intensify inspections of workplaces to ensure compliance with employment laws across vulnerable sectors such as hospitality, farms, trucking, construction, amongst others. Cabinet further directed municipalities to ensure the enforcement of municipal bylaws with priority given to trading bylaws. South Africans must also play their part by refraining from subleasing their business licenses to undocumented foreign nationals. On a policy level, the revised white paper on immigration addresses constraints with current immigration laws by introducing provisions of first country of safety principle, moving refugee reception centers nearest to the border, and a clause to enable relevant departments to designate certain trades, professions, and businesses only for South Africans and refugees. On the letter of Ghana saying they are referring the matter to the AU for the mid-year review and the discussion, our position is that we have nothing to hide as South African government. We will provide, if the AU decides to put the matter on the agenda, we'll provide the report, including the facts that are related to the matter, that there are no xenophobic attacks in South Africa. There have been attacks on foreign nationals, which is unfortunate, and that law enforcement has to do their work, and we have been insistent on them doing their work, including yesterday's discussion in Cabinet. It was very clear, it was communicated to the law enforcement departments, and state security is not part of law enforcement department. So the law enforcement departments, that they must make sure that the perpetrators and instigators are brought to book, and those who attack people are brought to book. It is this border that has said to South Africans, come and register for spaza shops, come and register for informal trading. But it's South Africans who are choosing to sublease. When the laws are very clear, the bylaws of municipalities are very clear that when you have that license, you cannot sublease it. It's for you to do business. It is this very government that have intervention programs to support through the Department of Small Business Development, to support informal and small business traders, or what you call micro business owners, to do their businesses, including the various spaza shops, hair salons, motor mechanic, panel beating, and so forth. And I know I was the Minister of Small Business Development when we first introduced the packages to support those micro businesses. So you cannot say there are no intervention. We have gone further, by the way, because you can't have people willy-nilly deciding to attack others with no basis of the attack, but based on a sentiment. And this is related to the tribal mobilization that is happening, that there's a grouping that wants to mobilize people around a particular tribe. So if you cannot speak that language, then you are deemed a foreign national and you are undocumented. You'll recall in one of the videos, there's a vendor guy who they want a passport for, and he tells them, but I am vendor, and so I will not have a passport, I have an ID. And they continued to attack him, to harass him. And he was just saved by the community. So that's why we're saying this thing is meant to undermine and destabilize the country, and we must call it for what it is. The mobilization against foreign national, it's a ruse that people are using to then want to mobilize society against the genuine concerns of South Africans. Because there cannot be a protest against opportunities, to protect opportunities for South Africans that then mobilize on a particular language. If you don't speak that language, you cannot speak. You are not represented. You cannot be. South Africa, there is only one nation, which is a South African nation, because that's what our forebears strived for. And that nation is both black and white. It's non-racial. It's non-sexist. It's non-tribal. And that nation must be united. We are united in confronting our challenges, and we are united in finding the solutions, but we see ourselves as one people. And that's why our constitution also recognizes the 12 official languages, with the prospects of recognizing more languages. Because there's no one language that is superior than the other. All languages in South Africa are equal. There are problems in South Africa of high unemployment. There are problems of employers choosing to employ foreign nationals because they can abuse them for cheap labor without following the labor laws of the country, and then forgo a South African. And there's the narrative that says South Africans will not take up those jobs. Why do you say South Africans will not take up those jobs when they are looking for employment? But there's also the part that South Africans are playing themselves, of when government made an intervention last year to say all informal businesses, including spaza shops, we must have business licenses, trading licenses. There was even waivers of registration fees. And what we needed was the papers that you are in the country. And we must also be clear, refugees, not the ones who go home during Christmas holidays, true refugees that are fleeing for one reason or the others and have been registered in accordance to South African law and international law as refugees, they are allowed to do business in South Africa and to find employment in South Africa. Why? Because South Africa does not host refugees in refugee camps. We allow them to integrate into communities. Unlike in other countries in the continent where refugees are hosted in refugee camps, they are integrated. And we at the point when we took the decision, was saying government will not be able to afford providing for refugees in refugee camps, and it would be better to get them to integrate into communities. So then when you go out and attack a foreign national on the guise that he's a foreign national without knowing his refugee status, it's a problem. And it's not true that government is not doing their part. We have been consistent. You'll remember that this is the very government that has established the Border Management Authority to strengthen the work at the border, at the ports of entry in South Africa. It is this very government that has done investigations, arrested people, and fired people for corruption in the border. It is this very government that has, since the establishment of the BMA, has deported over 500,000 illegal immigrants in the country. In that, we have made provision of first country of safety. You'll recall in the previous post-cabinet briefing, I indicated that in terms of first country of safety principle says, if there's a war in Zimbabwe, in Mozambique, in Eswatini, in Lesotho, in Botswana, in Namibia, the first country of safety can be South Africa or any other, because we are the first country that they go to. And I indicated at that briefing that there is no war even within the SADC region where people could justify flocking to South Africa. The wars that we know of now, it's in Sudan. And South Africa and Sudan, there are many countries of safety before Sudanese could arrive here. We have said we need to deal, we are putting that provision in our laws so that we can be able to remove people who want to seek refugee status in South Africa who are not entitled to be in South Africa because they are other first countries of safety. South Africa cannot be a center where everybody flocks to. But critical to that, as government, we have also said the problems of immigration southwards, outside of the criminality and other things that are happening in that movement, the human trafficking, drug trafficking, gun trafficking, and terrorism that is flocking through, we have said it's a development issue. We need to work in, that's why in our chairship of SADC and in our interventions we are saying we are supporting the industrialization and development of the region of SADC and support fully the agenda of the Agenda 2063 of the African Union for silencing the guns to allow development and Africa to prosper. That's why South Africa has been the biggest champion of the African continental free trade area, so that we could then grow together. We have even engaged with our counterparts in the continent and said, when we talk about the rules of origin, we want you to allow imports that will come and diminish the value of African products. We must foster manufacturing within our continent. It's South Africa who's championing the critical mineral strategy in the African continent, so that we can beneficiate at source, so that Africa, who is the largest reservoir of critical minerals, and critical minerals which are being used to develop economies such as China, the US, and other economies, the green economies, and the technology economies, the electronic vehicles, and the cell phones, and the digital economy. Those critical minerals are found in the largest abundance only in the African continent. But Africa is not developing, and we've said we must agree and we must be one within the continent, as a continent, to say we will no longer export those out, but not only that, but we are going to beneficiate it. If you want to have access, you must invest in the African continent and beneficiate in that country where you are extracting the minerals. We are no longer to be the exporters of dust and rocks. That is our position, because you cannot deal with the migration challenge outside of the economic and development opportunities. Because either you deal with it from a political strife and war situation, or you deal with it in economic terms, economic opportunities. So we cannot, everybody collectively, the African governments must work individually and collectively to develop their own countries, so that their citizens do not feel the need to migrate to another country to seek better opportunities. It is this country that has put those measures in place. But we have also equally put measures to protect South Africans. The President, during the State of the Nation address, announced the 10,000 labor inspectors, so that we can go inspect these industries that hire foreign nationals without paying them salaries, who then in the restaurant industry and hospitality, they have to rely on tips. It's a reality we need to confront. And it's the very government who have made that intervention, to say we're going to, because that's violation of our labor laws in South Africa. There cannot be cheap labor in South Africa. It's against our constitution that we are celebrating this year for being 30 years. That South Africa is not a source of cheap labor, whether by South Africans or by any other person, whether South African businesses or South African people. And will protect that provision so that South Africans can find jobs. And that is the commitment we have made in terms of the work that we've done. So I think South Africans we've got, and it's a pity that those of us in the media space who are supposed to know and remember are not remembering. South Africa issued the Zimbabwe special permit. You remember? and also issued a Lesotho special permit. What does that mean? It means when we plan, we account for the people who are carrying the Zimbabwe special permit and the Lesotho special permit. And with the Zimbabwe special permit that led us to issue a Zimbabwe special permit, we issued a Zimbabwe special permit because we were accepting the situation in that country that made it difficult for Zimbabweans to survive in that country, both the then political strife and the economic situation. And we said, as a country, with our records of human rights, with our commitments to human rights, with our constitution, with the history of our own struggle, we cannot afford to have our neighbors to starve to death when we are available. There was nothing that justified Zimbabweans to be refugees in South Africa. That's why we issued a special permit, understanding the situation that prevailed in that country. When the special permits expired, we have continued to renew them. And there was a point where we felt we don't want to renew. They went to court and said the situation has not changed much because Zimbabwe is still rebuilding its economy. So you can't then want to then say there's a Zimbabwe problem in South Africa. There's a Zimbabwean problem in South Africa. There's no Zimbabwean problem in South Africa. The Zimbabweans that needed to be assisted, they were given a special permit to remain in the country, which entitled them to do work in this country. It means when we plan including knowing that they will have to have access to services such as clinics and so forth. The Basotho the same. There was a discussion at some point to say, does the situation in Mozambique warrant a similar situation? And by the way, the people of Botswana, Namibia, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, and Lesotho, they are not just our neighbors. They are our families. If you recall, the Mosotho in Lesotho is no different from Mosotho in the Free State and any other part of South Africa. The Motswana in South Africa is no different from a Motswana in Botswana. The Nama people in Namibia, just to use one grouping, is not different from the Nama people in the Northern Cape and in Cape Town. The Khoi and the San people in Namibia are not different from the Khoi and San people in South Africa. The Vendas and Karangas in Zimbabwe are not different from the Vendas and Karangas in Limpopo. The Shangans and Tsongas in Mozambique and Zimbabwe are not different from the Vendas and Tsongas in Limpopo and Mpumalanga and parts of KZN. So they are our family. Because when you go into a restaurant and say a Zimbabwean is serving you and therefore it's a problem, you are assuming wrong. What if that Zimbabwean holds a ZEP? When you say a Mosotho who is doing household labor in your neighbor's house to say it's a legal immigrant, what if she's holding the Lesotho special permit? You do not know, and that's why we say you cannot take the law into your hands. It's only law enforcement that must do so. That's why the Department of Employment and Labor has to do their work and do inspections at workplaces. That's why we say South Africans must play their part. Do not hire a person who you do not know their status in terms of a permit. They must show you a permit. Because you can't come here and say, oh, we've got a problem of immigration and therefore the government must resolve it. But on the back you are hiring a helper from Lesotho yourself who you have not even checked the status. When we play, we must all play and work together. So you have nobody has a right to go and ask for papers. In terms of our law, is immigration officials and law enforcement officials that must do that. And we are saying, and labor inspectors, we are saying those categories of people must do their part. In terms of advisories, countries do whatever they do. The advisories are issued left, right, and center by all sorts of countries, all kinds of countries, every year, every time. And it doesn't change the price of bread. The price of bread is that South Africa has laws that must be respected, that must be abided to by all, citizens and non-citizens. But what's worse is those that are involved in criminality, because that's the discussion that is not being had. Those who intimidate South Africans not to run spaza shops and go to an extent of abducting them, kidnapping them, burning their shops, threatening them, beating them up. Those who are involved in selling drugs to our children, in drug peddling in our communities. Those who are involved, those who want to claim they're kings in our own country. And you say South Africans must sit quiet. South Africans will not sit quiet. We cannot be undermined in our own country, but we are saying to South Africans, we accept that we cannot be undermined and let law enforcement do their part. Where we are failing, protest to us to say you are failing us on this. And then we'll take up that. But you have no right to take the law into your own hands. Yeah, let me do the immigration enforcement. On what measures have we specified to reduce illegal immigration? When the BMA, and they continue to update and brief, they will come in not distant future to brief on the number that they dealt with during the Easter holidays in terms of preventing illegal immigrants coming into the country. We have already indicated that since the establishment of the BMA, over 500,000, 500,000 people have been deported for being illegal in the country. We have also indicated that Home Affairs is establishing the one-stop integrated borders that is modernized, that uses technology and so forth, and they are finalizing the appointments of providers and teams to work with them. I think it's 6 borders, which includes Bait Bridge, Libombo, I think where's the one in Botswana? There's Ramatlabana, there's Oshuk one. It's 6 of them that they are working to make sure that is work. So that work has not started now. It has started a long time ago. But also, if you recall, in 2025, Cabinet issued a directive to register all spaza shops and informal businesses in line with the bylaws of the municipality when we're dealing with the food poisoning saga, if you recall. And that process was undertaken over a 6-month period. And in that period, we also pleaded that people must not sublease their facilities. The city of Johannesburg, late last year, if not early this year, had to go to court when they were removing the trading of illegal immigrants in the city of Joburg who were operating on the sides of the roads in undesignated areas. And they won. You remember they were taken to court by the NGO called SERI, that is funded by companies that are not South African. They won because the laws of the country does not allow, and we had done the process. So we continue to do that work. We went in 2023, we went and revised and developed a white paper on immigration and refugee protection. That white paper was finalized early in 2024. In 2025, we then revised that white paper to make sure that we include these provisions that were not included in the first one. As the country, we considered withdrawing from the International Convention on Refugee and re-signing. And we advised that it's legally not possible, so that we could put what you call qualifying clauses, so that we could, like other countries have done, an exemption. The countries that are complaining about us today have done exemptions to say a non-foreign national cannot do business. You have seen those in Zimbabwe, in Botswana, in Malawi, in Ghana, in Nigeria, in Kenya, in Zambia. You can count all of them. They've got that in that provision. So on our part, we had to do this white paper and put this clause to allow us to then designate those times. But our law was always clear that to participate in a business in South Africa, when you are a foreign national, you must invest a minimum of 5 million. And sitting here, we know you don't need 5 million to operate in a spaza shop. So therefore, that area is out of bounds for foreign nationals, unless they are refugees, because the refugees are treated the same way as citizens are treated. Yes, because they have no other country. But the problem is that majority of what are called refugees in South Africa, during holidays they go home. Therefore, they forgo their status as a refugee. And that's what Home Affairs is tightening. So that when a person exits the country who is a refugee, they know that they've lost the right to be a refugee in South Africa. They were tightening their ability to trace that because there's been an abuse of the refugee system in the country. So we are tightening that. The time frames, we have been working on this. I'm sure majority of South Africans do not know that the white paper was approved first in 2024 and then revised again in 2025, and it has already been approved. As we speak, Home Affairs is working on the implementation of those clauses that can be implemented without the law, but also drafting the bill that must go to Parliament, that you must public participate in and say, we don't like this, we want this as South Africans. But the problem with us is that we complain. When we are required to make comments, we don't make the comments. We don't public participate, including even in the IDP processes of municipalities. We complain, but then the participation, we don't want to participate in processes that will help us. It's both a national security and a reputation issue. A reputation issue because countries, and I won't mention names, that in the last few months deported in mass foreign nationals in their own countries are now speaking up against South Africa, which we have not done that. It's a reputation issue because those who want to diminish the status of South Africa are using AI-generated videos, are using videos of countries, what do you call it, atrocities committed in other countries and claiming that they're in South Africa. South Africans don't use machete to fight. But there are videos that are purported to be xenophobic attacks in South Africa of people using machete to kill. It would have been, you would have written about it in your broadcasts, in your newspapers to say 10 people were killed by a machete-wielding crowd. We have not heard that. But those videos are being used to propel and mobilize an international outburst against South Africa, which is not based on facts. And we have, as cabinet, taken to task the police who escorted marchers and looked aside when marchers were beating a person and not arrest the people who were beating the so-called foreign nationals. To say that IPID must do its part for police failing to do their work, and that police must go back their videos, they must go and deal with the people who are attacking others. There cannot be impunity. It's a national security issue because of the mobilization. Because you want a country to go into an uproar as if government is sitting and doing nothing. And we have seen consistently attempts to mobilize an uprising in the country. And small issues are used and minor issues are used to mobilize the uproars and uprisings. And they failed, and they will fail even in this time. And what is worse now is that there's this tribal connotation to it. If you can't speak X language, you are not a South African. If you can't speak X language, it's unacceptable. As if those people of that language can speak our languages. So it creates both situations, and that's why we are closely monitoring and working to support law enforcement in intelligence-led operations to make sure that this is dealt with, and we'll deal with it effectively. When we went, we realized 70% of the people sitting in formal settlements are undocumented foreign nationals. So you can't provide them for housing because they're not budgeted for, they're not planned for, but they're also in the country violating our immigration laws. So you can't condone criminality, because when you violate our laws, you are a criminal. And that's why we then, as government, funded through CARA funds. We funded the Department of Home Affairs to buy buses to make sure that they can deport people who are illegal in the country. Having done the Zimbabwe special permits, the Lesotho special permits, and a number of dispensations we have done, there's no need for illegal immigration in South Africa. A country can absorb to a particular capacity level. The rising Eskom debt is linked to the inability of municipalities to collect to recover costs for services rendered. Municipalities, if they were doing their part, we would be able to curb even the problem of illegal informal settlements, because when a informal settlement is established, the municipality is there. They could go and remove within a period specified by law. But we're also making an intervention with the law, with the act that is in public consultation, the PI Act, the Eviction Act, to reduce the burden on the municipality and government or people who are affected by land invasion from to evict people in their land. Because we cannot have laws that protect illegality. So we are clarifying that in the it's called the PI Act. They'll give me the formulation, proper formulation, so that we can have you help us mobilize South Africans to make contributions in that Amendment Act on how we should deal with eviction, so that we can deal with the informal settlements that are also hosting illegal immigration, also are serving as hubs of criminality in our communities. Because there's when people flee to the informal settlements, the police have to get out of cars to chase. If it's only one van chasing, you can't go in because they may mobilize vigilantes to attack you. Police cannot drive into the informal settlements. And those are part of the things that we have been working systematically to address. On the number of Zulu nationals, you have to call friends. Okay, since 2014 to 2026, we received 1,783,584 applicants. And from 7 March 2024 to April 2026, 786 foreign nationals applied for visas and permits. Of this, 633 has been finalized, and 150 is still pending. As at 31 December 2025, there is 55,190 recognized refugees in South Africa. Can you see it's a very small number? Refugees, 55,000 recognized. And you've got 82,410 asylum seekers in the country. So the total number of refugees and asylum seekers is less than 140,000. So the panic that the numbers are too large is not true. We will not know how many undocumented foreign nationals, because they do not present themselves. We can work with estimates, but we will not know what is the number because they're undocumented. And that's why it's difficult to plan for, and that's why they become a burden on the public service system, because we can't plan for them. Unlike the ZTP holders, the refugees and the asylum seekers, and the Lesotho special permits holders, who you can plan for, to say we've got this now. Can you see the numbers we are planning for are very low? So the notion that we've got a lot of refugees in South Africa is not correct. Only 55,000. The notion again that we've got a huge number of asylum seekers is not true. Only 82,000 in the country. So the total of that is 140,000, and compared to our size as a population, that's a very minuscule number. And if we do the deductions, we from what Stats has done, you are going to have the numbers coming very low. That was responding to the specific question of saying how many of this in terms of category. And then the question whether I'll learn isiZulu. Mhlawumbe ngizolinda inkosi yamaZulu ikwazi ukukhuluma isiVenda nesiChangana neSepedi, nami ngizoyifundisa ukukhuluma isiZulu, ngoba akuna ilungelo of any people ukuthi bona bademand ukuthi mina ngikhulume ilimi labo bangakwazi ukukhuluma ilimi lami. Ngiyabonga.